The story of Amanda is true. Now, Amanda isn't really her name, and I think you'll understand why I didn't want to give her real name in the story when you hear what happened. I first met Amanda about 3 years ago. That'd be in 1996. I was at a children's hospital in Oklahoma City. I went up to the teen floor. Now, they usually have their own floor, and well, you could imagine how embarrassing it would be, how horrible to be a teenager with a 10-year-old in the bed next to you, so you want to make sure there's at least another teenager there. I just finished doing some stories for the younger kids down on the second floor and decided I'd just walk around and meet some of the teenagers. Amanda's door was partially open. I knew it was Amanda because her name was right there on the door. I looked inside, and here was this young, very pretty, blonde-haired girl laying on her bed, staring straight up at the ceiling. I knocked on her door and called her name, but she just ignored me. She just kept staring at the ceiling. So I decided I'd go on in and say hello. Well, there she was, laying there, looking straight up at the ceiling, her eyes wide open. She had that kind of look like, you know, when a teenager just got a new boyfriend or something, just kind of bleh. And I thought, well, Amanda's either thinking about a boyfriend or she's awful stuck up, because I was standing right there next to her and she was just ignoring me. I called her name again, and she didn't look my way or answer. She just kept staring up at the ceiling. So finally I decided, well, I was just going to go ahead and leave. Obviously, Amanda didn't want to talk to me. I turned around and almost reached the door when this lady doctor came walking in, and she said, "Oh, I see you've met Amanda." I kind of whispered to her, "Yeah, I met her, but obviously Amanda's just a little bit stuck up or something because she didn't want to talk to me." She said, "Oh, no, that's not the problem. Let me tell you about Amanda. Amanda's 16th birthday was Friday. That was just 3 days before I was there at the hospital. Said Amanda's best friend also had a birthday in the same month. It wasn't the same day, but they decided to go ahead and have a birthday party together. They were going to have a sleepover. They were going to have, 6 or 8 of their girlfriends together. They were going to sleep in the basement. And, well, actually, they weren't going to do much sleeping. They were going to do what teenagers usually do at a party like that. They were going to sit around, giggle, talk about boys, call on the telephone to their boyfriend they liked, or to the guy they liked who wasn't their boyfriend, but they wished they were their boyfriend. And as soon as they answered the phone, they go, "Ee!" and hang the phone up, and then they'd giggle some more, and then they'd call again and do the same thing over. And then they'd order more pizza from the mother, and the mother would bring it, and they'd eat all that, and they'd eat everything else in the icebox until there was nothing left, and they'd be on the phone calling, giggling, eating. And then finally, the mother had to go to the store to get some more pizza because they had cleaned the icebox out. Well, while the mother was gone, the Amanda was staying the night at the girlfriend's house in the basement, remember? Girl's brother came home. He had just graduated from high school. Had 2 or 3 friends with him. They came and went right up to the brother's room, and after just a little bit, the brother stuck his head out the door and hollered down to the girls and said, "Hey, you want something really cool?" Well, the girls, they just got through giggling and hanging up the phone. They were getting kind of bored with that, and they figured they'd go see what was going on. So they headed up the stairs to the room, and when they walked in the room, there laying on the bed was a collection of drugs, all different kind of drugs. This girl's brother and his friends had been out at partying, and they'd brought some drugs back home. Well, of course, the first thing they did was try to look cool about it and tell the girls how cool it was to use drugs, and only a baby wouldn't do it, and they dared the girls to try the drugs. Well, nobody likes to be called chicken or, be dared one way or the other, and so finally a couple of the girls went ahead and said, "I'm not scared," and they took a couple of the different drugs. Well, finally, after a few more minutes, every one of the girls, except for Amanda, had taken some of the drugs. Amanda was still holding out because, just like you, all the way through school, she had heard, "Just say no. Say no to drugs." And that's just exactly what Amanda did. She said no. But now, not only were the guys calling her chicken, but also her friends were. Amanda finally gave in. But she wanted to really prove that she wasn't chicken, so instead of taking just one of the drugs, she took 3 or 4. And just about the time she got them popped in her mouth, they heard a car drive up. The mother had returned with more pizza. Well, the girls took off, heading out the room as fast as they could down to the basement. The guys were gathering all the drugs up. Amanda made it to the door, down about 3 of the steps, and suddenly she passed out cold. Rolled the rest of the way down the steps. Lucky she didn't break her neck. Landed on the floor. Well, you could imagine what the scene was like. The guys are rushing around trying to hide the drugs. The girls are now all screaming and crying and trying to get Amanda up, but Amanda was out cold. The mother came in the house to all this hysteria going on, sees Amanda laying there on the floor, calls 911. Well, the hospital is only about 5 minutes from Amanda's house, and in less than 10 minutes, the ambulance was there. They had Amanda on the stretcher, putting her in the ambulance, and a couple minutes later, they were back at the hospital. But by the time they got there, Amanda was in a complete coma. Now, if you're not too sure what a coma is, it's kind of like, imagine you're sound asleep and nothing can wake you up. As a matter of fact, the way that they test to see if somebody is really in a coma or not, or if they're just in a really deep sleep, is they take a big needle and stick it in the bottom of their foot or in their big toe. Now, I can guarantee you, you might be asleep, but if somebody jabs a big old needle in the bottom of your foot or in your big toe, you're going to wake up. If you're in a coma, someone could stick that needle all the way through to the other side, and you wouldn't move. You wouldn't wake up. That's what Amanda was in, that kind of coma. By the time they had gotten her to the hospital and pumped her stomach, the combination of drugs had destroyed most of Amanda's brain. Now, I know you've seen the commercials, where they have the frying pan and the egg, and they say, this is your brain. They hold up the egg, they crack it in the frying pan. This is your brain on drugs, being fried. Well, Amanda's brain was fried, destroyed. The only part of her brain that remained working was the part that allowed her to swallow and to breathe on her own. Other than that, she couldn't even close her eyes. In fact, the doctor told me that about 6 or 7 times a day, I had to put eye drops in Amanda's eyes. Because if they didn't, because they stayed open all the time, that the moisture, the fluids would evaporate, and her eyes would literally shrink up and fall back in her head. Also, Amanda has to wear a diaper. Now imagine how embarrassing that would be to a teenager. She can't even get up and go to the bathroom. They have to change her, wipe her bottom like a little baby. Amanda lays there in the bed. She's got IVs in her arms, in both arms, a tube stuck down her nose to feed her. Another one stuck down the other nose to give her vitamins and to take all the fluid off of her lungs. They have to stick a big tube down her throat to suck the fluid off her lungs. And Amanda just lays there. Now, while the doctor was telling me this, she started crying. She said, I'm sorry. I've been in this children's hospital on these wards for years now. I've seen 6-year-old little girls bald-headed from cancer treatment and their hair falls out. I've seen kids come in here with half the skin burned off their body. But the reason Amanda's so special to me is because, you see, I have a daughter that's 1 week older than Amanda. And the day they brought Amanda into the hospital, when I went home after work that day, my daughter was in bed asleep. I walked in the door. I woke her up and I hugged her and I said, please don't ever do what Amanda did. Said I told her that story and we both sat there on the bed crying. You see, just that day before, my daughter had come home. She was all excited. She had a date, her first real date. And she brought home about 15 teen magazines. We sat there at the table and we talked about how she was going to fix her hair and what kind of dress she was going to wear. And was the guy going to ask her to the prom? And where were they going to go? And all of that. And the next day, I met Amanda. Amanda will never go on a date. Amanda will never plan what she's going to wear, how she's going to fix her hair, how she's going to do her eyes, where she's going to go. Amanda will never have to worry about what she's going to wear to the prom, whether or not she'll pass her driver's test the first time. She'll never have to decide which one of the 92,000 flavors of ice cream to choose at the ice cream parlor. Amanda will be laying in that bed the rest of her life. And I thought, you know, Amanda's in that bad a shape. How long could she live with most of her brain destroyed? And the doctor told me, oh, Amanda's in excellent physical condition otherwise. Barring any unforeseen complications, Amanda will live out her life 30, 40, 50, 60 years laying in that bed. They have to come in 2 or 3 times a day and turn her over on her side and back over on her other side, because if they don't, she'll get big old huge sores that'll rot the skin right down to the bone. The doctor told me she had talked to Amanda's parents. They just could not understand what had happened. Amanda was the perfect daughter. She had never used drugs before. She didn't even smoke. You know, she didn't drink. She was on the cheerleading squad. She got good grades. She got along great with her brothers and sisters. She had lots of friends. She lived in a good neighborhood. And look where she is now. Do you think if Amanda had it to do over again, she'd make the same choice? She'd give up the rest of her life to keep from being called a chicken? I don't. And imagine how Amanda's friends feel. A doctor said, you know, all of her friends from school and everything, well, they all came to see her, of course, after she was in the hospital, but they felt so bad about it, and especially her best friend. She couldn't even come and sit by Amanda's bed. She'd run out crying. So Amanda lays there alone, day in, day out, staring at the ceiling. See, you never know. Amanda was a good girl. She made one mistake. No, that's not right. She didn't make a mistake. A mistake is leaving the house and forgetting your lunch. No, Amanda made a bad choice. You see, as bad as it all is, you can't blame those guys that brought the drugs to the house. You can't blame anyone who called her chicken, dared her to do it. The only person you can blame is Amanda. Now, I'm sure all those other people feel bad about it, but it's not their fault. Harsh as that sounds, Amanda only has Amanda to blame. All she had to do was say no. Turn around, walk out the door. Amanda will never walk again. Please remember Amanda and what happened. Remember, when you're tempted to give in, to make the wrong choice, I hope you'll see Amanda laying in that bed. I don't want it to be you. It'd be such a waste, such a waste. As I told you in the beginning, Amanda's story is absolutely true. I met her. I saw her there in the bed. You know, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be in a situation like that. I mean, I had to have back surgery one time, and I could barely move from one spot to another for a while, but I could move, and I knew I was going to get better, and I did. If I were to ask you this question, I guess I am going to ask you this question. Do you think that Amanda, if she knew what was going to happen, would have done what she did? Of course not. But you see, we never know for sure. And none of us ever know for sure exactly what's going to happen when we do something. Some people would say Amanda made a big mistake. But we know it wasn't a mistake, right? It was a choice. Hers alone to make, and she made it. She screwed up big time. Don't ever get in a situation like that. Don't ever think that you can do something even one time and get away with it. Because remember Amanda. One time, she didn't get away with it. Be a man. Be a woman with guts. Raise your standard. Raise it so high that everybody else is looking up at you. Don't ever give a reason for somebody to look down on you.